Hello, my front-end friends. I don't usually make videos like this one, but there's too much cool stuff in here not to actually talk about. And if you're wondering what that is, you probably know, you clicked on it, but the Chrome 133 beta has just come out, and there's some really good stuff in here, and I just wanted to mention it. And I just actually did a podcast episode recently talking about the keeping up with web development, and one way to do that is just look at release notes, because I don't think you should learn everything. Don't know how everything works. Just be aware of what's possible, so when you need it, you know about it, and following release notes is a good way to do that. And we're going to come back up to the top. I'm going to skip one of the things in here. But first here, we're going to start with this one, which is the open pseudo-class. Not the most exciting thing, but kind of cool. We have an open pseudo-class that matches dialog and details now when they're in their open state, and matches select and input when they have a picker or other things showing, which is really cool. I think the select one is going to be useful with like stylable selects that we're getting, and less so right now because we can't do too much with our selects. But the fact that we'll be able to style inputs and selects differently, and like an input type color is what I'm thinking, or the calendar and other stuff, like we can have different styles for that, but for dialogue and details, definitely useful right there. This I know is something that people are very excited about, and I've been following, or I talk with Adam Argyle a lot, and following the state of this a bit, because he's been heavily involved in this, which I like that they give us a thing here. I know people have wanted this scroll state stuck top, so you can actually change the style of something based on that. And this is probably an article by Adam. It is. Look at that. So we go from dark mode. Oh, we got the dark mode clicked in there. Cool. So yeah, we have a stuck state now. We also have a snapped state. Trigger styles when an element is snapped. So that's if you're using the scroll snapping. So we have a stuck state, a snap state, and trigger style changes when an element is overflowing. That could be so good even just for debugging, right? But here's an example with a scroll-driven animation where you could use a scroll-driven animation. I have an old video, I'll put a link, where you can do a really nice job actually with it. And there's some advantages where you can actually like have it scroll off and then reappear really easily using a scroll-driven animation. But I know people like doing this all the time, where when it sticks, you want it to change styles, and we have a pseudo class that allows us to do that. So that's really cool. Container, scroll state, stuck top, and then you know it's stuck and you can do stuff with it. So yeah, I think people will be very happy with that. That's a feature we've definitely been wanting for a while. So the text box trim, text box edge, yeah, really. This is, let's go see the demo for this one. We're not touching any CSS. I just want you to be aware of the awesome stuff here. Another one by Adam here, where we can cut off the extra space that's around text. And he's doing it on this version here. I'm going to pause that. He's removing it where at the X height, and then at what we call the alphabetic bottom, it's like the baseline of the text. You'll also be able to choose whether you're cutting it at the X height or the cap height. Which is cool. And so you know where you're taking it off. So if you've ever had text where you have like too much space on the top or bottom, I'm sure you've seen this with buttons, depending on the font you have, where if you put padding and it's the same on the top and bottom, and then it actually looks visually different, and then you try playing with the line height and it helps, but it's not quite good enough because you just need different padding on the top and bottom. It fixes that. If you have articles where you have like alignment, here's another example there, cap height getting cut off. I love this little animation with the scissors. But yeah, here's in Figma now they have the vertical trim. I don't know why we have the longer video. Let's go back for a second. But yeah, there's the option in Figma where you can choose how it's working as well. And it just makes it so much easier to line up text and cut text where you want it to be. So there's different options and stuff. So yeah, here, this is a great example for when you have, like, you want the trimmed leading here on the top, because without it, you get that extra space. So even though you have a certain amount of padding, it looks different. And then even the space between elements, you're using gap in Flexbox or Grid should be consistent spacing. But if it's a larger font and then you get that extra space on the bottom, it can actually seem larger in different areas than other spaces. So we'll actually be able to get consistent flow now as well, depending on what we're after. And that could be really useful. I have played with this, and I will say just one thing to be really careful with is, like, say you do it for your buttons, like I mentioned before, your padding values are going to be double probably what you're used to putting on there, because we're cutting off so much. It's crazy the difference it makes. So just be aware of that. Your gaps and your other things will definitely potentially have to be different from what you've traditionally done. So don't just throw this into a project. Use it. You want to use it intentionally. The hint value is another one right here. So hint value for the popover attribute. So the popover specifies 2 values, auto or manual. This feature describes a third one, which is popover hint. This is the type of thing if it's a tooltip or something like that. And so yeah, we have something specifically for popovers being used as tooltip and hint type things, which makes sense because I think that's one of the very common use cases for that type of thing. Now, not everything in here is directly CSS related, but there's this, so there's a few web APIs here that I'm going to skip over. You can definitely come in. This is the one I wanted to look at though, which is DOM state preserving mode. And this is really cool. So adds a DOM primitive node prototype move before that lets you move elements around the DOM tree without resetting the element's state. So if you need to move something on the page, you can do it without having to remove it and then insert it somewhere else. And cool, like an iframe remains loaded, active elements remain in focus, popovers, full screen, modal dialogues all remain open, CSS transitions and animations can continue. This is pretty cool. Definitely something I'm going to want to play with just to really understand, but I'm sure you've seen a lot of examples of some really cool demos and stuff where, I don't know, there's an iframe or there's a video playing and then the video gets moved while we're doing something else on the page or something like that. Like, it's going to be so much easier to do that with this type of thing. But yeah, I definitely will need to dive more into exactly what it is, but this one definitely caught my eye as something that I'm going to want to play with. And now we're going to jump all the way back up to the top though of this is honestly the reason I was making the video. I am so excited about this. And this is the attr function, going from something we would only ever use on pseudo elements to being something we can use the way it was always meant to be used. So let's see if this blog post here has an example. It gets an upgrade. So here, div data foo equals blue, and then you could have the color look at the color coming from the data attribute. And this is actually kind of interesting. This is like the upgraded version where there's a fallback. So this is if you're used to custom properties with a fallback, where it's trying to get the color from here. But if the color, we don't have one, it will use red as a fallback. I'm guessing. I didn't. Yeah. Okay. It is the fallback right there. Just looking at it, that's what I inferred. So then an example here is we can use the ID card 1, 2, 3. And then the view transition name can come from that. And that means each one of these has a different view transition name instead of having to manually put it on there. Oh my goodness, this would be great. It makes your life a lot easier. Data size 10, and then you can use the size for your font size, for example. This I'm not 100% sure I love. I don't want, the scary potential thing with this is like going down a data hole of just styling things and having utility data class style set up. Like, I don't think this should be used like that, but it's just that we can use the data attribute now for things. And I'm thinking for theming and other things too. This could be really, really useful because you could have, yeah, there's been so many use cases where I've wanted to use the attribute function. I'm like, oh, this would be really good. Oh, I can't do it. It could even be like, if you're hooking in with JavaScript on a item and there's like however many left in stock, right? And so like the pseudo element could always have that number and pull the number in as like a pseudo element could use that number for something for the actual text string, which is cool. But now I know I can also like change the styling of that based on the same thing and use it in creative ways. Anyway, I don't remember that's not the best example in the world that I'm thinking of right now. And I'm gonna have to start playing around with it now that it's only in beta right now, so we can see my browser doesn't even currently support it, but you can go get Canary if you do want to play with it. And I'll definitely be making videos on this, but this is one of those things. Again, I just want to reiterate that part where if you're just like, oh my goodness, there's too much happening, just read these things really quickly, be aware that a lot of these things are possible. Or the release notes like this when they come out, to be aware that, okay, these new things are in the works, that they're coming. And then when you run into different situations while you're working, you don't remember how to do it. You won't even remember necessarily what it is that does it, but you'll go like, oh wait, I think there was a way that you could do that. And then you can look it up and try and find it. And that can be a hard part too, but that definitely something that you can do. And yeah, just so many awesome things in this release that I'm really looking forward to. And I'm so happy we're finally going to get the attribute function to do what we've long wanted it to do and be able to use it outside of pseudo elements. So that's really really exciting. And I'm saying pseudo elements, it was always just with the content property, and now we can use it everywhere. So really cool. With that, as I mentioned at the beginning, I talked a lot more about this idea of just keeping up with the state of CSS and web development in general, I guess. And I talked briefly a little bit about how that can, even if you struggle or feel like you're behind, sometimes it can cause things like imposter syndrome and other stuff. So that was all in my latest podcast episode. I'll put a link to it down in the description below if you want to check it out. It's on a second YouTube channel, and it's also on all the podcast player thingies that are out there like iTunes and Spotify, etc. So yeah, with that, thank you very much for listening. And until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.